And welcome back.
I feel filthy, Rog. Filthy! What was with that last video about Sonic Forces? You all being excited and defending that game. It's a mess, that's what it is!
No, it's not. I mean, Sonic Forces is not quite what I wanted, and it's extremely blunt and awkward in the way they implanted its features and ideas. But there's a lot of things they improved on and great ideas they had. I had a good time.
What's happened to you, man? You used to nitpick and destroy games for their mistakes. You've gone soft.
The game just didn't piss me off like the others did. It kept its speed, action, focus. It's funny. Unintentionally, but still.
Oh, shut it. Let's do it again and do it properly this time. Complain time! Now for lesser discussed aspects of this game. First of all, let's talk about the localization. You wanted to left Pontaff off the hook, but I won't, the bastards. I've been checking out the original Japanese dialogue of the game. Well, not all of it. Only the cutscenes and a few individual bits. But it's clear the translation screwed a few things up. For starters, the infamous Sonic is tortured line isn't in the Japanese version. They just mentioned he had a rough time in prison. Then the Tails has lost it line. The Japanese version just mentions Knuckles doesn't know where Tails is.
Actually, there was Silver out.
Not that he lost his mind. So that's at least 3 dark, edgy lines that got the panties of a lot of Sonic fans in a bunch, while being entirely unnecessary. It really reminds me of Sonic Lost World. Pontaff has a tendency to throw in random darker lines around to spice things up. Perhaps their old Happy Tree Friends instincts kick in again. Who knows?
And on top of that, there's a lot of complaints that the dialogue of Sonic Forces is very stiff. Yeah. Now, this is very interesting and not entirely Pontaff's fault, and in fact that happened because they were probably sticking too close to the original tone, which fans like me have demanded of them, and Sonic Team did market this game partly on, written by Japanese writers this time, so can't help but feel a little bit responsible here. Anyway, so I recently watched Sonic Adventure's original Japanese cutscene with straight translations, and I noticed how stiff the dialogue was there too, with all the "Hey, you big trip, where you going?" cheesy stuff created by the translators, while the original version is just a dry, "Hey, he's escaping." Very on-the-nose dialogue. I feel for the localization team. It's quite difficult here. The Japanese are very Captain Obvious and straight with their dialogue, which doesn't sit too well with the Western audiences, who want our heroes to be a little bit more poetic than just tell me exactly what's going on. So what do? You punch it up, which the adventure games did it by mostly making everything a little bit cheesy, and Pontaff does by either spicing things up with dark edgy lines out of nowhere, or their special brand of self-aware humor. All of which have a large group of Sonic fans hating that with a passion. Although everyone will say Sonic games don't need Shakespeare levels of writing, I do get the feeling that you need someone with the writing skills of a Shakespeare to find that balance between this all to make it work. Poor localization team.
So I found a joke in the Japanese version that I'm surprised Pontaff removed. It involves Dr. Eggman making a joke on wordplay, which is usually their cup of tea. In the Japanese version, Infinite has a tendency to refer to Sonic and friends as trash. Then when he reveals to Eggman that he lets Sonic escape, he dismisses him as trash again. Then Eggman says something to the effect of, "Even trash can still contain hazardous objects." I like that line. Eggman still agreeing that Sonic's trash, yet still reprimanding Infinite. It also avoids the plot hole that Eggman is angry Infinite didn't kill Sonic, while he himself was happy to keep him in prison before. In the Japanese version, he never says Infinite should have killed Sonic. It's implying Eggman would be happy if Sonic goes back to his cell. So yet again, a plot hole caused by Pontaff making things edgy again.
It's kind of weird to be complaining about things being serious and edgy. Well, that was kind of what we want, at least on a surface level. That's the frustrating thing about this dark and edgy stuff. It's not like we want Sonic to be dark and violent. It's that we don't mind the occasional dark bits if it helps telling a good story. Maria's death or Eggman holding a gun at Amy's head in Sonic Adventure 2, they empathize the legit story beats and characters we're dealing with. They aren't just there for the sake of being dark and edgy. And it's not like I really need that stuff. If Amy was just stuck in a cage instead of having a gun in her face, that will work too for me. I'd be fine. Scene still works. Although the gun does add a layer of spice and intensity to the proceedings. That's the problem with Pontef's attempts to add serious elements to the story. They think they're pleasing us, but it's quite the opposite. It's the story weight, the consequences, the context behind the intensity that we like. We like characters being in genuine danger, having genuine problems to fight through, real adventures to go through, and we accept the darker bits as part of that. But if you just spread out dark dialogue and dark implications in the story where they don't really fit, or don't really lead to anything, aren't earned, then it's just shallow and meaningless. Adding chili powder to a meal is great, but just giving me an empty plate of chili powder is just kind of dumb.
Granted, it's not as awkward as in Sonic Lost World, where the darker dialogue was really out of place and didn't fit the tone of anything at all. Still, using the torture line doesn't help anyone. Fans of light-hearted Sonic are disgusted and use it as ammo to fight against any serious stories. And fans of serious stories are just angry that it's just a meaningless statement, immediately contradicted by the behaviour of the characters.
Yep, that's the trick with punching up the dialogue with cheese, meta-humor, or dark edginess. Gotta make sure it fits the character, situation, tone. It's quite a challenging balancing act. Again, I feel sorry for the localization team, because they can't even change the nature of the story itself, just the shape of the dialogue. This is quite a puzzle for them.
Why are you so nice towards Pontef all of a sudden? Look at all the damn jokes.
I kinda like they gave each character their own style of humor. Shadow's more blunt, Knuckles more blue-collar working man humor, Sonic with the quick one-liners, and only Tails being straight Pontef humor with the wordplays. True that felt natural enough for me. Sonic doing his comedy routine, but when he met Infinite for the second time felt alright because it's implied he's playing mind games with him to try and dig up information about Infinite. Plus, there's something about his behavior that comes across to me like it's more of a desperate, panicking kind of crazy humor. It reminds me of James Bond cracking jokes when he's tortured in Casino Royale. It's like it's more of a coping act. But that's just my interpretation, I guess.
That banter in Green Hill Zone feels so out of place. Like Eggman talking about how brilliant his stupid chainsaw is, despite him having world-conquering technology. It feels so forced just to give Tails that joke.
Yeah, it's clear they wrote that joke outside of the context of that scene. But because it's so off, it's kind of funny to me, but whatever. I'm kind of curious what the original Japanese version of that scene is.
Another thing. Am I the only one who thinks this game started as a free-to-play cell phone game before Sega figured out that would be a terrible idea and got rid of it? Forces seem designed like one. There's the level grinding you do with the avatars. That's a cell phone game thing. If you consider the idea this game started as an endless runner, the linear nature of the levels makes more sense. But something I find especially interesting are the daily missions. The game wants you to boot up the game on a daily basis to do a special mission. This sort of thing makes sense for cell phone games. Those want you to play the game over and over. It tricks search engines into thinking the game is more popular, so it gets recommended to more players. Not to mention you'll run into ads more often. That's the primary income for these types of games. But for a fully priced game, this makes little sense. Why would the developers care if you play this game every day or not? They already got your money.
Maybe it stopped the second-hand market. Also, let it be said, this game does avoid all the free-to-play tricks. This game doesn't make you sit through ads, never ask you to use real money outside of its initial pay. But I can't deny the structure seems to hint that this design might have been part of the game at some point, but that Sega decided against it since the whole DLC extra content stuff is becoming a sore point to so many gamers these days. If it's true the game used to have more of a cell phone money trickery scene going on, I bet Sega's really happy they took it out right now, considering the loot box scandals firing up. Whether games playing mental games to get kids to fork over real money for loot and extras are gambling games in disguise. Either way, let me repeat myself here, the game never makes you pay extra money, so this entire gambling loot box stuff is entirely removed from the game. It's just interesting that the game does resemble the skeletons of those games in terms of design. No wonder Jim Sterling seems to like this game, considering how much constraint Sega's showing here. And good thing too, last thing Sonic Forces needs is more controversial elements.
And of course, Sonic Forces actually has an actual cell phone game going on, Sonic Forces Battle, which surprisingly doesn't have the avatar in it. That game is very playable without spending any cash or watching many ads. Surprisingly, but never mind that. Point is, it's clear Sonic Forces didn't have a very smooth production time. While we don't have much evidence, and it's unlikely we'll ever get any, the Japanese rarely talk openly about their production, but I can't help but notice this game seems to have changed direction a few times, with quite a few clues left in the puzzle. But the writing is on the wall, considering how messy Sonic Forces is. It's clear the game drastically changed direction quite a few times. Speaking of which, Infinite. Again, is it me, or did they write two entirely different backstories for this guy? Because I swear this game has bits and pieces of two stories for him and hops back and forth.
What do you mean? He's a mercenary wolf hired by Eggman after failing to rob him, and then after Shadow apparently murders the other wolves and kicks his ass, he goes mad, gets upgraded by Eggman, and becomes his loyal henchman, swearing to never show signs of fear, weakness, and mocking those who do.
Right, but check the final stage, when the Avatar character and Sonic storm Eggman's lab. In the background, there's all these science tubes with someone in it. And immediately afterwards, Amy starts lamenting on how sad Infinite is for being born in a lab and never having known true friendship or whatever. Doesn't really fit the other backstory, does it? This seems to hint Infinite was supposed to be a fully artificial creature at first, and not just a souped up mercenary.
Maybe Infinite is literally born in Eggman's lab? I mean, Eggman is a doctor, maybe he does birth. Joking aside, yeah, that would explain the constant friendship speeches. Sonic's constantly hammering on how he's different than Infinite and Eggman because he has friends. Well, they don't understand such things, even though Infinite is shown to have been a leader of a troop.
Sure, he could have been a moronic leader that doesn't work well with others. Still, Sonic doesn't know. It seems weird to put so much emphasis on a theme like that if it wasn't set up properly, right? Hence why I think Infinite was originally meant to be more artificial. A literal Clone Wars.
With Infinite and perhaps Shadow and Zavok and such, all clones created in a lab. Not the first time Eggman created artificial shadows. These look more organic.
That's probably why it's taken out. Too dark of a story. Them murdering actual living organic beings, even if they're clones. Now they just fight meaningless illusions. Of course, this is all conjecture. We don't know for sure. Still, the hints are there, so it's fun to think about what twists and turns the story took during development.
But yeah, with the clunkiness of classic Sonic and a mess that is Phantom Ruby, it's easy to come to the conclusion that the story was being reworked up until the last moments. No wonder they felt the need to include those prequel comics.
Speaking of which, I'm not sure how serious we should take those as part of the game's story. I mean, did the Japanese audiences get a copy of those comics? Will they be included when Sonic Forces get a digital Super HD 3D remake on the PlayStation 5000 far in the future? They feel a bit clunky, how they just throw it at you like that.
Yeah, I can't help but think the localization team realized fans would be angry when Silver being there and Knuckles' position didn't get some sort of lead in. Makes you wonder if Sonic Team didn't have time to work that in the actual game or didn't care. How hard is it to have Silver and Knuckles mention these things naturally in an in-level dialogue? It doesn't really matter. It's a fun little extra reading, and I guess they wanted to avoid throwing too much lore and history in the game itself. That would confuse the newcomers.
Really wondering how much influence Sonic Team had on those comics. Are these real parts of the story they planned, or just a localization team filling up the giant holes Sonic Team left and them just stamping their approval on them? Really makes you think.
It's tempting to assume the worst of Sonic Team, considering what a mess they made. Still, just conjecture at this point, and even with those prequel comics, it's a mess.
Yeah, they're written like a parody, except without jokes. Oh, I'll say decide to be a rebel leader out of nowhere. Oh look, the most powerful magical crystal of the universe happens to be right at my front door. It's like Sonic Team travelled to the future, looked at your parody video of Sonic Forces, and then reverse engineered the actual story from that.
Yeah, so for those who really wanted to care about the story, I feel for you. It improved matters on the surface level, but the details of the story is a mess. Oh well, as I always say, a bad drama story is always better than a bad comedy. At least bad drama can be hilarious. Bad comedy is just a pain.
So then, Tails being useless. Well, honestly, he's just as useless as he's ever been since Unleashed. He was cowering in Lost World too, although he did get to become a cool cyborg. Anyway, So to compensate for his uselessness, they made him an entitled brat so he could pretend he's useful. And then when people got angry over that, they overcompensate by making him a complete wuss. Maybe time to make him playable again so you don't have to overcompensate, eh, Sega?
I was thinking about Tails and I realized, doesn't his behavior make a lot more sense if he was classic Tails instead of modern Tails? I mean, his constant worship of Sonic seems to harken back to his old Sonic 2 days. I wonder if the original plot had it to be classic Tails with classic Sonic. Hence, that's why they reversed his character development.
Even classic Tails wasn't this much of a wuss. He defeated an entire army in that old Game Gear game that takes place before Sonic 2.
Ah, look, Sonic Team can barely remember plot points they set up in the game they're working on. You think they remember an obscure Game Gear game? Probably not canon or whatever, too. But yeah, I agree, even if it was classic Tails acting like that, people might have protested. But it still makes a lot more sense than post-Adventure 1, and especially post-Prima Donna Lost World Tails to act like this. Makes you wonder if more of the classic team showed up in the original plans, and that's why classic Eggman is on the signs. Or if the game was about time travel at first, and you traveled the classic Sonic universe, and then they decided to tie Mania into this game, and then the story was changed so Mania took over some of the plot points and levels that were part of Sonic Force's own game. So they split it up later. Maybe that's why Green Hill Zone and Chemical Plants don't do double duty. But this is all baseless conjecture. Might not be true at all. And even if it is, we'll never find out. Still, considering how messy Forces and its production were, it's very easy to imagine this being the case. And while I love that the levels are more story-driven, it's disappointing they didn't make two versions of each level theme, like a pre-Eggman War and a post-Eggman War version. There's a lot of awkward moments where it's clear we're supposed to see the city when there's not an attack going on yet, but they couldn't be bothered taking the giant robots out of the level and such. Very noticeable it happens twice that the same characters are surprised there's giant death egg robots in the city, and talk about it like it's a new development even though we've seen those damn robots every time we're in town. Even more facepalm worthy is Tails making notice of Green Hill Zone being sandy 10 stages in, even though we already saw Green Hill Zone being destroyed 6 months earlier in the first stage, and Green Hill Zone is connected directly with the city where Tails spends the entire 6 months. It's a shame.
Level design. Don't get me started.
Oh, I won't. In fact, I'll stop you right here. Let's not go into that until we have a proper Mania Forces showdown, because I think it's worth exploring what Sonic Team is trying to do, because let's face it, Sonic Forces level design and gameplay design isn't entirely a fluke coming out of nowhere. The series has been evolving toward this point, but that's for another time.
Good. Can't wait to give Forces another thrashing.
Geez, look what got your feathers so riled up.
There's only 7 avatar levels. I spent minutes creating the perfect awesome Sonic fan character, but there's barely any levels to play with him. I got bored with the same 7 levels over and over, especially since I already had to replay them so many bloody times to unlock the hat I needed. This game needed like a Chowgon kind of thing for our avatars, to have races together, hang out.
Reenact your porn fantasies?
Exactly. No. Anyway, and don't tell me there's more levels with him with the team-up stages than bosses. They don't count.
Right, it is disappointing. Sonic Forces. It's not bad or glitchy or broken, but disappointment and overcompensation are better words to describe it. Well, till next time.
Seriously, Lord Lukington III is finally complete, and I can't do anything with him. It's an outrage, I tell you.